Few would have guessed before its premiere in 1977 that Star Wars would be a multi-billion-dollar franchise and a pop culture international sensation, resulting in many spin-offs. Some were better than others. Star Wars in 1977 was simply known as Star Wars. We take a deep dive into its opening scenes and how it made cinematic science fantasy into what we know it today. These are the 9 minutes that changed everything. The first frame. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. In 10 words, we know this is a story not set on or about Earth. This turns storytelling on its head. Outer space science fiction films were about exclusively told in the present or in the future. But Star Wars is a story about the past. It was a very clever hint that this is a fairy tale. The opening crawl. It's no secret Flash Gordon was a movie that George Lucas wanted to make. He pays homage. What makes this special is not just the presentation, but the content. Lucas uses a technique from the 1940s oblivious to the younger generations watching Star Wars their first time. It immerses us into the story by telling us we're in the middle of it. The opening shot. The awesome yellow planet of Tatooine emerges from a total eclipse, her 2 moons glowing against the darkness. A tiny silver spacecraft, a rebel blockade runner firing lasers from the back of the ship, races through space. It is pursued by a giant Imperial Star Destroyer. It's all about scale. We see not only one celestial body, but 3. Then comes a spacecraft that's in the middle of a battle. But then came another, much larger and more deadly. Most brilliantly framed, we see the Star Destroyer give chase, representing the supremacy of the Empire and the overwhelmed rebellion as the underdog. But there is something we haven't seen. No, you didn't see this in Star Wars. There were no opening credits in George Lucas's film. Not just clever in 1977, but dangerous. Opening credits has been part of films since its dawn. It did more than spotlight your favorite actor, writer, or director. It gave credit to people who paid for it. But it also branded union certifications. During times it was important to remind the audience the production they're about to watch practiced fair labor. There lies the kicker. The most effective way to get the audience into the story is not reminding them it's a man-made production. George Lucas did away with crediting producers, writers, actors, and himself, changing the definition how a film opens. He told the story he wanted to tell, how he wanted. The opening dialogue went to C-3PO and his sidekick R2-D2.
Did you hear that? They shut down the main reactor. We'll be destroyed for sure.
This was ahead of his time for the following reasons. 1. The opening line is given to a character hidden behind a costume and not human. For us who grew up on Star Trek, we would call C-3PO a robot. This is what we're used to, what a robot looks like. This or this. Kicking off a movie with 2 robots talking to each other is a gamble. The audience may not have empathy with characters they can't see their faces, something that's going to come into play in just a few short minutes. The other interesting thing about having C-3PO speak first, it foreshadows the idea that he's the film's narrator or storyteller. The camera gives attention to C-3PO and the very important words he says. There's no escape for the princess this time. We're beginning to be told of a character's backstory we haven't met yet. We know her as the princess. This takes us back to Star Wars being a fairy tale. And the princess is one who likes adventure and gets into trouble. After the rebel cruiser is swallowed by the Empire Star Destroyer, the rebels prepare to be boarded. We see some of them stand, kneel, or taking cover. There is a close-up after close-up. This reminds us these are individuals putting up a fight. The stormtroopers, by contrast, are a faceless, homogeneous enemy with no individuality or personal traits. They are exactly who they are supposed to be. The antagonists we have no empathy with. In this part of the film, we're not explicitly told who is good versus who is evil, but we do see who is weak and who is strong. The awesome 7-foot-tall Dark Lord of the Sith makes his way into the blinding light of the main passageway. This is Darth Vader, right hand of the Emperor. His face is obscured by his flowing black robes and a grotesque breath mask, which stands out next to the white armored suits of the Imperial stormtroopers. The entrance of Darth Vader is one of the most effective entrances and introductions of a villain that didn't require one line of dialogue. We get our first look at the princess, not in a close-up or a line of dialogue. She is introduced wearing white in contrast to Vader. Associating herself with R2-D2, it's a subliminal message she's a hero. What makes this unusual and ahead of its time Introducing a star character by an extreme long shot. Normally, talent likes to be framed in close-ups, does good for their egos. After a cutaway, the camera frames Leia into a mid-shot, symbolizing time is running out and the stormtroopers are closing in. When C-3PO and R2-D2 go away, we finally see a medium close-up of Princess Leia, but she exits to our left again. She's mysterious and elusive. The battle's over. The battle's lost. Did you notice they're rounding up droids? "What have you done with those plans?" said Vader. We not only see Vader's brutality, but his physical strength. In a few short minutes into the film, it has lived up to the opening crawl, further immersing us into the story, all with minimal time or dialogue. I think John Williams was ahead of his time by creating different themes with each character. Leia's theme is played as she steps out of the shadows carrying a blaster. She shows she can fight for herself and is willing to sacrifice her life to stand up to the Empire. After the droids use the escape pod, and miraculously not blown out of space, we learn they are on a secret mission. This is the first indication the story will go past what the opening crawl told us. The story follows the droids and not a human. The differences between Leia and Vader is literally black and white. There is no escape for the princess, as predicted by her storyteller C-3PO, as she is surrounded by stormtroopers. Meanwhile, Vader stands unimpeded. The officer standing to her left is little more than set design, as he contributes to the color black, but he gets kudos for lecturing Vader without having his throat crushed. The camera frames Vader in a close-up, also known as a reaction shot. The camera also frames Leia in a close-up, as she continues to be defiant. This is to emphasize both the seriousness of the confrontation and how close Leia is to mortal danger. Vader orders a pursuit on the planet Tatooine. He says,
"There'll be no one to stop us this time."
The Empire has an overarching goal. Rebellion is common in this galaxy, and the rebels are making progress. No Man's Land. Where the rugged desert mesas meet the foreboding dune sea, the two helpless asteroids kick up clouds of sand as they leave the life pod and clumsily work their way across the desert wasteland. The life pod in the distance rests half buried in the sand. After a cutaway of the cold vastness of space, we see the hot vastness of desert. C-3PO and R2-D2 are framed in an extreme long shot. Unlike the previous scenes where no one could hide in a cramped ship, they are lost in the openness. The tracks left behind give them little hope of what's ahead. The story centers around the droids because that's what the cinematography tells us. And in the first 9 minutes, we have a fantasy film unlike one we have ever seen before. I hope you enjoyed my analysis of the first 9 minutes of Star Wars. Let me know in the comments below what surprised you in the opening minutes, now known as Episode 4, A New Hope. Like, share, subscribe if you choose. This is Mr. G from Synergy saying, don't be a mindless philosopher or an overweight glob of grease.